Just had a tail skid that dug into the tires to stop them. And they had a handhold in the end of the wing. You could help them turn. It's hard for them to taxi. And a little bamboo stick underneath the wing, to curved stick to keep the wing from hitting the ground. And so I liked airplanes, and they let me sit in the airplane sometime and wiggle the stick and play like I was flying. Of course, they never took me for a ride. That was strictly taboo. But I knew then that I was going to learn to fly. But we were poor as church mice, and I didn't know how or when, but we were going to learn to fly. And when we moved from the farm over west of Beaumont to Houston in 1921, I was just in high school, 8th grade. And my uncle had preceded us here and had 2 shooting galleries downtown. And in order to go to Central High School, he lived in the Heights, I used one of his shooting galleries as my residence, address for my residence, so I could go to Central High School, be downtown, so when I got out of school I could go to work in his shooting gallery, and also hitchhike out to the Rice flying field. So, and that worked for 3.5 years, and one day the truant officer was playing too much hooky and going out to Rice flying field, and the truant officer came around to my home, which was a shooting gallery. He said, he can't be living here. And he found out where I lived, and so my last half a year, I graduated from Heights High School, 1925. And working in my uncle's shooting gallery, I saved enough money because, as you know, your regular customers, they want to bet something on, if not just for the shells or something, and get the betting. And in the 3.5, 4 years that I worked in his shooting galleries, I saved enough money to buy an interest in a Jenny JM-14D, a Jenny training plane, out at the old Nolan Wells Field, which was on the old Main Street Road. That's this side of Main Street, in 1926. And it was hard to get people to teach you to fly in those days, but I managed to get soloed. Of course, in those days, the main part of flying was taxiing the airplane. No brakes, and that was the main part. If you learned to taxi, well, the airplane wasn't too hard to fly. And when you soloed, since airplanes were unlicensed and the pilots were unlicensed and nobody had any control over you, well, you begin to barnstorm, carry passengers, and learn to fly. Build up your time and learn to fly. And that's what happened to me. 1926, before the airport was built, at the intersection of South Houston Road and Telephone Road, which has been moved north because originally it was up just north of the #1 hangar on the airport and came across the airport into South Houston. We had a hay baler, it was just a field, and we had a hay baler cut us a runway, cut the grass for a runway in a little area around South Houston Road and Telephone. And Hank Erdman he was from Galveston, and later the big man in Trans-Texas Airlines. He had a Hisso Standard, which was a little bigger front cockpit than the Jenny, and he could put 3 passengers in there, and my Jenny, which was just really made for one, but I could put 2 in there. Sometimes they'd have to sit on each other's lap, but like I say, we didn't have the regulation. You had to have a seat belt for them or anything. And we were barnstorming in 1926 off of Hobby Airport, a strip which is now Hobby Airport. And then in 27, when Carter built the airport, originally if I remember correctly, there was a little frame administration building at the north end of the field, and just south of that was a Quonset type hangar, and I'm thinking it was 60 or 80 feet at the outside, and it was facing south and no doors, of course. And then,
Excuse me, Mr. Reed, can we go back a little bit?
uh-huh,
Could you tell us about Carter Development, the company that was developing garden villas?
uh-huh,
Coming in
Mr.
at
W.T. Carter, a good friend of mine. Mr. W.T. Carter was developing garden villas, and it's my belief that he built the airport to advertise garden villas. That's what I think. And Haywood Nahums, which the street's named after, and Charlie Newhouse were kinfolks of W.T. Carter, and they were the first managers of the airport. We didn't call them managers, but they ran the airport originally. And the second hangar, I'm not sure just when the cafe was built. It was catty-cornered to northwest of the administration building. But there was a cafe there, and I think it was built in 27 or 28. I'm not sure exactly the date. But then south of the one hangar that Mr. Carter had, and called his company a company called Southwest Airplane Company, and they were distributors for the Waco airplane. That was what we called at that time a new production airplane. It had streamlined flying wires. Jenny, of course, had round wires. And the second hangar, I believe, was Raymond Pearson's personal hangar. He was a Ford dealer.
Let's go ahead and cut now because this plan's going to start the engines.
We gotta cut because this guy's leaving. He's making too much noise. When we come back, what I would like to do is, whenever you have the years, whenever you can interject the years that something was going on, if you just say, give me the year, and you've been doing that.
Well, I'm trying to do it, of course. Some of those years get run together sometimes.
Sure. You can say around 1938 or around so-and-so. And so when we come back, you will have been talking about, in 1938, the Southwest Airplane Company. Was that
was about 1927.
27?
Yeah, that was when Jim Davis was their chief instructor. Are we going now?
No, we'll wait.
All right.
Is this
Looking
when?
good.
Let me ask you real quick. Is this when Wheatle Williams Flying Service was in, or was it later?
Now when Jimmy Waddell started his airline in here, I'm not sure about the date. I believe it was later, though. I don't believe it was that early.
Okay. We'll just leave that out.
Let's see, we had, I guess, I remember his airline well.
But I think you're right. I think it was later.
It was later, though, I believe. But to go on, the second hangar was Raymond Pearson, who was a Ford dealer. And he had an airplane. I don't remember for sure what his first one was. But then he later had a pit-carrying mail wing, and Frank Hawks worked for him. And then, of course, later, Frank Hawks got to flying Walter Beech's Travel Air 13 mystery ship, and setting some records, and he left Raymond Pearson. I don't remember exactly the year he left for sure, but it was in the late.
Okay, Sherry, we're ready to pick up.
Okay. So let's just start back then. I guess we're to, you've already talked about Southwest Airplane Company. Why don't we start back in 31 when J.D. Reed, or the Air Activities hangar, the first FBO?
Okay, you want to start with that? All right. Well, maybe let me finish with the
Okay.
hangars on the field.
Okay.
Raymond Pearson had a hangar. Then the next hangar was Joe Glass and Glenn Loomis, and it faced east. No doors on it. But it wasn't a Quonset type hangar, and they were the Eagle Rock restrictors. And then as you go on south, the next two hangars were two Quonset type hangars facing east that the National Guard occupied when they moved from Ellington to the airport in 1927. And I had my Jenny, and by that time I had traded for a OX-5 Eagle Rock, and it was unlicensed also. I didn't have a license. And the Department of Commerce were the first people that were in, and originally in 27, 26, they weren't around much in 26 at 7, but 28 when they began to regulate the airplanes, well, they would give you a license if you wanted it at that time to get you to join in with them, as they said. But I didn't join in with them until 1929 because my airplane was unlicensed, and if I had a license, I couldn't fly my airplane unlicensed. So I didn't take out my license, transport license, until 1929. Then I had to license my Eagle Rock, and I took it in my Eagle Rock. And at the same time, in 1927 or early 28, I enlisted in the Texas Air National Guard because they had a primary trainers #1, PT-1s, with a Hispano engine, which was a high-powered engine. Most all of our airplanes had OX-5s, 90 horse. Hank Erdman had a Hisso in his standard. So I enlisted. I couldn't qualify for a commission because in those days you had to have 2 years of college to go to Kelly. So I enlisted so I could be around a modern airplane. They still had round flying wires though, but they were more modern. They still didn't have brakes or tail wheels. So I enlisted in there and made several 2 weeks active duty camps and enlisted. And since the lieutenants and the commissioned officers knew I could fly, they would let me fly some in the air, but they couldn't. I wasn't supposed to, but I did get some time in the PT-1s. And then in we had another little airplane that I sold and operated off of the airport, what they call the Veronica. And then in 31, we formed the Air Activities Incorporated and built the city to build it for us, the #1 hangar. And it had no doors originally, and it was open to the north. And we had a full FBO. We did everything. We had schools, mechanics, did everything but sell gasoline, and the city held that all to themselves for a long time. And when Howard Hughes made his round the world flight, I guess in 37 or whenever it was, about that 8, we had put oyster shell runways on the airport. The first runways were oyster shell. And some pictures that Jim Craddock and some pictures I've seen, Howard Hughes taxied in to our hangar in the Air Activities in his Lockheed 14 on the tour after the round the world flight. And he, you could see the shell runways in those pictures now. Bob Bailey Studios, I'm sure, has a motion picture of that incident, and Jim Craddock, I believe, has a still picture of it. Then there were some more hangars built then after the city built before they built my hangar, which is called number 1, they built a hangar south of the original hangar. Oh, in the meantime, the original hangar, tornado came through and scrambled all our airplanes and blew all the tin off of the Quonset hangar. And when they built it back, they built it a bigger hangar and a square construction. And then they built a hangar still open south, and then they built a hangar just across from it, which had an opening to the north. It was a different construction, kind of stone, and it's still standing. But it now has doors on it, and later they put doors on the other hangar.
Okay. You want to tell us about when the Texas Air National Guard built their hangar?
They built theirs. When they built the present hangar where Houston Executive is.
Mm-hmm.
You want to,
Yeah.
Okay. In the meantime, I studied and taken correspondence courses in 1931. I went before the board at Hensley Field and took an examination to qualify me for the equivalent of 2 years of college. And I took a flight examination and qualified for a second lieutenant's rating and a rated airplane pilot at Hensley Field. Major Harry Weddington was commanding. And the U.S. Army Air Corps Reserve. Then it was a division of the Signal Corps. And then I flew as a second lieutenant in the reserve. Galveston had Fort Crockett, and we had airplanes, A-3 attack planes, and San Antonio. And then about 1933 or 4, Major Harry Weddington had been transferred from the Air Corps Reserve in Hensley Field into the Texas Air National Guard as the commanding officer. So he called me, says, we need some pilots to burn up some gasoline. Come on down here. And so he switched me over and transferred me from the Air Corps Reserve to the Texas Air National Guard as a second lieutenant. I was 33 or 34. And then in 1936, I'm pretty sure of these numbers, there were 29 officers in the Texas Air National Guard, and Major Harry Weddington promoted us to put up a $10,000 note apiece. And he took them downtown and did something with them and got some money. And Lieutenant Bert Austin was an architect. Somebody found this present steel in the building. It was stored up at Middletown, Ohio. It had been a World War blimp hangar. It had been torn down. And the steel in that building was Major Blackburn at the time. I say he stole it. He says he requisitioned it. Anyway, we got the steel. Bert Austin drew the plans, and we started building the hangar. Built it, and it was a beautiful hangar. Up on the northeast corner, second level, we had a gymnasium, dance floor, and it was the country club of the Air National Guard at that time. It was the finest facility in the United States. And in 1939, the WPA came down here and went downtown, I guess, and picked up our notes. I never did pay mine. And they put a plaque on the building that said WPA 1939. Of course, we had it built in 1937. They didn't give Major Wellington or anybody any credit except WPA. But that was all right.
And so today that's Houston Executive.
That's Houston Executive has it now. It reverted back to the city when the Air National Guard was nationalized and went to war. It reverted to the city. And in the air activities hangar number 1, we had a school for the Navy in conjunction with the,
We gotta change
We
tape.
gotta change tape.
okay,
Sorry.
okay.
Okay. What, so you're fixing to tell us about, who flew out of, air activities?
Well, we had a school for the Navy in conjunction with the University of Houston. That's what I was going
Okay.
to tell you. We were Fairchild distributors. There was one incident in 1936 that might be noteworthy. I sold Dr. A.C. Scott Jr. a Fairchild 24. He's of the Scott and White Temple, famous hospital. And he couldn't, he had a license, but I couldn't check him out to turn him loose. And there was a boy, Sonny Knoll, he's a retired colonel in the Air Force. He was 16 years old at that time, and I'd been teaching to fly, and I knew he could fly. He didn't have a license. But I had him fly Dr. Scott to Temple and come back on the bus.
What I want to talk about mainly, I guess, is we already talked about Howard Hughes, and that was in '38. And what I'd like for you to do is tell us a little bit about how, remember how you told me before, how after he came back from that round the world tour, they named the airport after him, and until they found out. I want to kind of go over that too again. And then talk about, remember, you talked about in '36 aviation enterprises and the teeter-totter airlines and the people that flew out of there.
Yes,
But he's still
I
rewinding.
don't believe it was 36.
38.
Well, it might have been 38. Because it was when we had the school, and we were using the old terminal building. Is he running now?
No, he's
Not quite
rewinding.
yet.
Are you?
No.
Oh, okay.
Huh?
No, he's not running it.
Well, do you want me to tell you about when the first terminal burned down?
Yes,
Okay, I'll touch on that.
yes. And,
You tell me what you want to touch on, and I'll try to.
Yeah, would you?
There's a lot of things that you're probably not interested in.
well, we can cut it out. We're not going to have a lot of time to get into different, like people, and their stories.
Okay.
We need to concentrate on the hangars and some of it, and then as the airlines start coming in.
Well, I believe the General Liddell started coming in, 33 maybe, somewhere in there. There was one incident about Will Rogers that I kicked myself. Will Rogers was a real good friend of aviation. He did a lot for us. Wiley Post. Will Rogers was waiting in the terminal one day to go to New Orleans on Liddell Williams, and of course the pilots could all ride free because they wanted to look like the airline was busy, so we could ride anywhere they went, anytime. And Will Rogers was the only passenger they had, and he was trying to get somebody to ride to New Orleans with him the conversation, I had something to do that with a student that afternoon, and I turned that down. I've kicked myself 100 times since. But I could spend 2 hours with Will Rogers. But that's in the past.
Okay, let's see. So,
Is he running now?
Yes, sir.
yeah. Tell us then about the Aviation Enterprises hangar.
Okay, in about, we had the Navy School in about 38, in conjunction with the University of Houston, and Aviation Enterprises rented the old National Guard Quonset type hangars and started operating as a school. Oh, I believe they were distributors for a little airplane called the Aerocoup. And they started, Johnny Hamp was there, and I guess Hank Erdman was there. And then they acquired the school, the government school for women out in Sweetwater, and operated it under the name of Aviation Enterprises. We had at the same time received a contract from Randolph Field to build an Air Force primary training school, which we built at Corsicana. I had to take in different people, and we operated it under the name of Air Activities of Texas at Corsicana. So we had the nucleus of pilots and everything for the Navy school. And then after the war was when they phased out all the schools, that Aviation Enterprises got together and got a franchise to start an airline, called it the Trans-Texas Airline. People used to call it the Teeter-Totter, but it was a pretty good airline. It was a good airline.
Where they operate?
And it's now, I guess, Continental.
Where they operate?
Huh?
What airplanes they operate?
They started with DC-3s, converted from Air Force C-47s to DC-3 passenger.
Tell us when Brownie Root moved into the Air National Guard hangar.
Well, if I remember correctly, it was after the war, probably 46, 5 or 6. I was offered the opportunity to rent half of the hangar. They just had originally half of the hangar. And the Air National Guard used the north half, and all the city was offering for lease was the south half. And that was in, I guess, 45, because that's when I built the number 2 hangar on the field. As that's when I took on the Beechcraft distributorship. And,
Tell us about that.
about the
J.D. Reed hangar.
J.D. Reed hangar, as I said, Mr. W.T. Carter was a good friend of mine, and that's where the old terminal used to be. And when we had the school, we had converted it into a dormitory for students. And while the students were living there, it caught fire and burned down. So that was where I built it. That was the only location on the west side that I liked, and with W.T. Carter's help, I managed to get the city to build me a hangar in that facility. That was in 1945, and it was finished in 46, and that's when I took on the Beechcraft distributorship for Houston area. And then later You got the distributorship in the New Orleans area, and then later the Dallas area. And at that time, I was the biggest distributor in the world. Sold the most airplanes.
Tell us about your relationship with Walter Beach.
Well, my relationship with Walter Beach goes back when we were fooling with racing airplanes. He won the Ford Reliability Tour, which was a race from town to town in 1929. And then after we got to selling Beechcraft airplanes, well, originally when we talked about the airplane, Harry Hamill had been selling Beechcrafts up until that time, and he was located over in Austin, and I'd been selling the Howard airplane. And then after the war, Howard didn't elect to go on and build any more airplanes, and so I talked to Walter about representing Beechcraft, and he said, well, if Harry doesn't want it, of course, it'd be his first option if he wants it. And he talked to Harry, and Harry had been hurt during the war, and he operated a school also out of Brady, and he had been hurt, and he didn't want it. So Walter says, you're my man. And that's all the contract we had for years. He said, you're him. And then later, as he got to taking less and less interest in Beach, and Mrs. Beach and the other people began to run it more. I think it was 47 or 8 that they wanted us to give them a financial statement and sign a contract. And I held off as long as I could. I said, well, I sure hate to give them a statement because I believe they're going to start forcing more airplanes on us. But of course, at 47, 8, and 9, we were selling plenty of airplanes. It wouldn't have been too bad, but I believe it was about 50 or 51 before I had signed a contract and sent them a financial statement. Walter could hold them off pretty good for a while, but finally, just had to do it, I guess. And I did. And things went downhill from there. But we still sold a lot of airplanes. I had a good relation with Beach. In 1948, Walter came down and said, J.D., you like your Beechcraft deal? I said, and I had begun to fool with racing airplanes in 46. He said, you like your Beechcraft deal? I said, yes, sir, I like it. I'm making a lot of money. Sure, I like it. He said, well, I want to build a racing airplane, and I want you to front for me.
Yeah.
We gotta stop because this airplane's making too much noise, JD.
Okay.
Sounds good. Very take off here.
This part is very important.
Yeah.
Sure. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm trying to get in the way of your thing here.
Just picture the back of her head and a lot of sound. You see the guy over the horse turbo.
JD, you want a sandwich?
Gonna pull over the
I've got
turbo
sandwiches
course.
over here. Can I offer you one? We'll take a little break.
Gets that bit forced. Yeah.
Strawberry sandwich with free.
I might try one of those.
Okay, this
Might
is
be
kind
all
of
right.